Hi there, this is Solitude from Solitude Films, and welcome to another episode of One Director, 4 Films. Today's subject is a director that used to be in my top 3 directors of all time, and over the last 25 years has plummeted. Probably wouldn't be in my top 25 if I ever do a director's ranking, and that's Martin Scorsese. Now, I do think some of his older, more regarded films haven't aged as well, and like I say, the last 25 years, there's plenty of his films I haven't actually seen. So for the purposes of this episode, this is films I'm going to choose: a fundamental Scorsese, a favourite Scorsese, a gem, and a flounder. Now, for the flounders, he has made some, in my opinion, bad films in the last 25 years, but I don't have them in my collection, so I won't be picking those films. But I'll get to that discussion when I get to the flounder. The fundamental Scorsese, I've went with Taxi Driver. It's one of the films, his classics from the olden days, that I do think stands up very well all these years after it. Because when you think of Scorsese, you generally think of New York, and you can almost smell New York in Taxi Driver. It's got a seminal Scorsese performance, which you should see. You should definitely see that. You should see a seminal performance by Jodie Foster and Robert De Niro, and wonderful support by Harvey Keitel and Peter Boyle. I could have chosen one of his more gangster heavy films, but I think Taxi Driver still stands up so well today, and again, it's quintessential New York, which is essentially Scorsese. My favourite Scorsese, probably by a fairly wide margin over perhaps the King of Comedy, it's Age of Innocence, a kind of Scorsese film at first blush doesn't seem like a Scorsese film. This is one of his perhaps nods to Michael Powell. There's another film that I'll be mentioning that's more of a nod to Michael Powell. But this is one of those films that's absolutely perfect. I may be weird, but this is my favourite Scorsese film. Daniel Day-Lewis, Michelle Pfeiffer, that I was never that big a fan of until I saw her in this, and Batman Returns, and Winona Ryder, who at first blush kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, but in the events of the story, there's a lot more than meets the eye. Daniel Day-Lewis is somebody who thinks he knows what's going on, but he doesn't. One of the Scorsese films that narration by Joanne Woodward actually works. He is quite a fan of narrations, sometimes more successful than others. And this film is absolutely gorgeous. If you watch it on as big a screen as possible, it is one of the Scorsese films that for me you can definitely say is a masterpiece and one of the greatest films ever made. For gems, there's actually a couple of ways I could go, but as I mentioned, Age of Innocence has some little nods to Michael Powell, but Kundan is more overtly a homage to Michael Powell, as far as, I mean, this is a film that's not that interested in narrative particularly, or plot driven sequences. This is all about sound and colour, and emotional camera moves rather than plot driven camera moves. This is an Italian Blu-ray, because I'm not sure, I think there is a region A, but I'm not sure there's actually too many other versions on Blu-ray. This is just a sumptuous film, quite beautiful, and again all about emotion and sights and sounds. Got a very interesting score by Philip Glass. And this is Scorsese again, perhaps stepping out of his normal remit, but it's a little gem. And now we come to The Flounder, and again, I'm not going to pick one of his later films, like The Departed, which for me is one of the worst films made by a director who's supposed to know what he's doing. But again, I don't have The Departed in my collection, and will never have The Departed in my collection. And again, there's other of his later films that I haven't actually seen. But so for The Flounder, I'm going to be a little bit controversial and actually pick one of Scorsese's early kind of sacred cows. I'm going to pick Mean Streets, which I used to like, but again, like quite a lot of Scorsese's catalogue, I don't think it ages that well, and it's just not as enjoyable as it used to be, or not as interesting as it used to be. Again, it's an important film. It's one of his, early films that are held in high regard, but I think, for me at least, the shine has kind of went off it a bit. But again, that's just a personal choice. Again, if I was picking just a terribly bad Scorsese film, there's a few from Gangs of New York onwards that I could have picked, but again, I don't have them in my collection. So for me, it's Mean Streets. So again, this series is about you, not me. So if you'd be so kind to put your fundamental Scorsese film, this film that sums up Scorsese to you, your favourite Scorsese, an underrated gem, and a flounder, a film that you don't really like or don't really get or doesn't really connect with you. So thanks so much for watching. No doubt there'll be more of these to come. And thanks so much for people who've commented so far. And this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.